Talking About Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by Steve Davis and David Olney of Talked About Marketing. More than 8,000 conversations have taught them something. You can't read the label from inside the bottle. Everyone needs external perspective. Through their 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. They explore marketing with curiosity, generosity, and the occasional gentle eye roll. They hope this becomes a trusted companion on your journey in business.
David, you've taught lots of people about understanding geopolitics and war and all those sorts of things. Do you think we're going to survive what's happening at the moment with the skirmishes in Iran? What's our pulse check?
We'll definitely survive. It's just going to be a bit bumpy. And bumpy can turn into really bumpy if it drags on for too long.
Shall we try and smooth out some of those bumps in our next bit of half an hour or so?
Either that or we can just buy a hovercraft.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. These are insights for the whole person, not just the business operator. Oscar Wilde put it this way: the aim of life is self-development, to realize one's nature perfectly. That's what each of us is here for.
In the person segment for this episode, we're going to travel to Ukraine. Are you with me, David?
I am.
We're doing it not alone, thank goodness, but with Nicholas Christakis. Now, you've actually interviewed him before. Who is he, to the best of you? He's at Yale.
Yeah, it would be one of the first big guests we had on Blind Insights. So it's probably early 2018, maybe. So it's a long time ago now. Yale professor, humanities, wrote a really interesting book on if you give people the opportunity, they will generally be kind, that's the default behaviour. He was really nice to talk to, but I remember coming away from the interview going, wow, this is one of the most ungrounded, floating in the stratosphere academics I've ever spoken with. And I think my groundedness has probably annoyed him, and his otherworldliness has certainly annoyed me. But I still love the book, and it was loads of fun talking to him. So I'm actually really glad to know that he's grounded himself and gone to Ukraine and gone, this is the world we live in.
Well, he was interviewed by Sam Harris in one. I've got a small collection of go-to podcasts that I love outside of ours. This one's called Making Sense by Sam Harris. And so he had a chat about what technology is doing to us. I mean, that part of the interview is worth us revisiting in a future episode. But I think with the world at war at the moment, either directly or by proxy, all of us, I think if we're honest, are carrying some degree of extra anxiety because, you know, in life we really don't know what's going to happen the next day, but we kind of feel comfortable most of the time that we have a pretty good sense. At the moment, it's the randomness of it all is laid bare, and we're feeling that. Many of us are. And so I thought for this segment, what can we do to anchor some perspective for ourselves so that we don't give up? We can focus on what we need to do at a time when ourselves, our businesses, our family, our friends need us to be present. And that's why I love this little story that Nicholas relates from his time having to go to Ukraine to deliver a series of lectures. And it came after Sam and Nicholas were talking about the sense of entitlement that American students are showing, and certainly were showing in the last few years, of needing to be wrapped in cotton wool, too sensitive to have any concept put in front of them that made them feel unsafe. And then he went to Ukraine and experienced this.
I got there the first night at like 8 o'clock, and it was just packed with students. And it made me really ashamed, like how eager and hungry these students were to learn, and the adversity with which they had to put up with. And the fact that, American students were complaining about safe spaces by which they meant not necessarily hearing ideas they disagreed with. But, the Ukrainian students literally, their notion of safety was like, would they be safe enough to complete their education? Would their society still be there given the Russian attack? So it was just very, very sobering and uplifting to see these students that were so engaged in their learning. And anyway, the second day, there was the air raids went off in the middle of my lecture, and we had to relocate into a bomb shelter across the street, which was 2 stories down in this old Soviet building, which had been built to resist a chemical warfare attack from the United States. There were these huge, thick steel doors with those like round wheels that you see in submarines to steal the blast doors. And we just relocated to this little subterranean room. And I gave my lecture behind the blast doors. And the students, Sam, were beaming, and I think they were beaming partly because they were so happy I was there to witness their experience. Like what it was like for them to be learning in a time of war. And I released a video of this on the YouTube channel For the Love of Science about a little documentary that was done about this little journey. But anyway, it was just an extraordinary experience. And I wanted, I was just sort of thinking about learning in a time of war and how reinforcing the transcendent importance of learning, even in a time of war or in a time of chaos and fear, is important not only in the United States, not only in Ukraine, but also in the United States. And this ties it back to what we were talking about, that actually having these deep commitments during this time we are right now of all this political polarization, all this chaos, all this ascendant stupidity that we see around us, recommitting to these fundamental values of truth and learning, which, by the way, are also deeply humane values, is really important and good for us actually to do.
David, you've lectured before. How would your students at Adelaide University have coped if midway through a lecture the air raid sirens went off and you all had to go across the road, downstairs into a huge shelter designed to survive a chemical attack by the US?
It would have been a meltdown because there was no time to adjust and there was nothing like it in their experience. If that had ever happened, I would have really hoped that I had a class full of refugees from Iraq and Syria and South Sudan. Kids who actually were grounded, who I could then, get them to help motivate, move and organize everyone else.
And that's because they've already been exposed, almost like vaccinated against panic.
Yep. Their first thought is, hang on, how do we take action together for collective safety? They default to that through experience.
There's a bit of overlap there to the mindset that the Stoics talk about, isn't there, of preparing yourself for when things are bad by systematically giving yourself a taste of things that are bad, to inoculate your senses.
Yep. The difference is they often had bad early on, and that's why they ended up coming to Australia as refugees. But in some ways, as much as they have those difficult experiences, it also sets them up to be much better risk takers, to be much better explorers, to feel safer in being inquisitive, because they have a much better idea that they can cope and that they not just can cope, but that they can probably find a way to thrive.
Well, I'll be honest, during the aftermath of this attack on Iran and Iran's retaliation and everything that's going on, and it's the threat of it all cascading, did take my eye off the ball, I must say. I felt it. It really knocked me for six, and I've taken a lot of energy to draw myself back into the saddle, which is why I wanted to bring this topic up in this episode, because this podcast is about not just the businesses we run, but us, so that we can keep running them. And Nicholas, in his interview, right towards the end, says, actually, Sam, someone's just brought to my attention words by the author C.S. Lewis from a sermon he preached, a speech he delivered in 1939, autumn of 1939. So we're talking about World War II. The world freshly remembering World War I, and now the clouds of war are upon us. And this speech, I think, could be written to us today as if it were back then. I just want to read you the first couple of paragraphs. The war creates no absolutely new situation. It simply aggravates the permanent human situation so that we can no longer ignore it. Human life has always been lived on the edge of a precipice. Human culture has always had to exist under the shadow of something infinitely more important than itself. If men and women had postponed the search for knowledge and beauty until they were secure, the search would never have begun. We're mistaken when we compare war with normal life. Life has never been normal. Even those periods which we think most tranquil, like the 19th century, turn out on closer inspection to be full of cries, alarms, difficulties, and emergencies. Reflect on that for us, David.
It's amazing to reflect on how some things could be literally reread every decade for a different group of people in a different place. You know, normal, in the way we've understood normal in Australia, is abnormal. For it to be so calm for so long, and for people to come here having had the harrow experiences of what is actually more normal, which is turmoil and ups and downs and uncertainty and fear. And they come here and go, wow, that kind of chaos doesn't happen here. We can get on with other stuff. But what you get to learn when you get to know people that have come from hard places and seen hard things is they were still curious there. They still looked for beauty when they could. They still looked for knowledge when they could, because it's in those things that transcend the suffering of normal chaos that humans excel and come up with ideas for how to make things better.
So the takeaway for this person segment for me is this. As Nicholas noted with the students in Ukraine, who he said later, he's been in touch again with the students and the faculty. Some of their buildings have been hit. They're now living in the caves, the cave systems from old villages. In the midst of all that, the students are still keenly committed to learning, to wanting to stretch themselves, this creative learning endeavour. And then we've got C.S. Lewis reminding us that, you know what's happening now is almost the state of normal in the scope of world history. So please, despite us understandably feeling anxious or wondering what's the point, my plea to myself and everyone is to not give in to that, to find a focus. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, one of the things he came away from Nazi concentration camps understanding is those people who had the centre of their focus outside themselves, but in something to do with the community, were the ones who were able to survive and get through bleak times. So I think for all of us, it's okay. Stuff might happen beyond our control, but let's not sacrifice the opportunity we've got to continue achievements with our businesses, achievements with our interpersonal relationships. David, anything final to add?
Yeah, I'll probably just expand a little bit on Frankl because it makes it even clearer what you need to do when things are difficult. What Frankl learned in the concentration camp is that people who have meaning beyond themselves, can cope with nearly anything. And there were 3 simple ways he defined meaning. There's meaning in love, meaning in work, and meaning in how you choose to confront suffering. So if you can only focus on one of those, you're still going to be better off. If you can focus on 2, you're going to cope even better. If you can keep all 3 in mind, you're going to get through, because that's what he saw time and time again in the concentration camps. People can deal with anything if, for the sake of love, something they want to achieve, and the right attitude towards suffering, they get through and then they go on and apply that meaning to make the world a better place.
David, I love working with you to make this podcast to help make the world a better place.
Thank you, sir. Me too.
are 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. These are ideas worth building on. As Oscar Wilde reminded us, you can never be overdressed or overeducated.
David, I never watched Breaking Bad. Did you? Did you watch Breaking Bad?
No, there were a few clips, and I thought I've got better things to do with my life.
Yeah, I did watch part of the first episode and thought, oh my God, there's just people being chopped up into little pieces over drugs. I think I had the same view as you.
I don't need this in my life.
I don't need it. Anyway, at least I worked out how to really clean a bath. That's one thing.
Very useful skill.
But if we just expand that a little bit to Breaking Badly, that's the title of a book by Georgie Dent that you've recommended I should have a listen to. I haven't had a chance yet, but you have. Can you give us your dust cover summary?
Absolutely. Georgie Dent, as a young woman, went off to boarding school, and when she describes her behaviour from age 12 onwards at boarding school, is quite anxious, and it affects her health. And at 19, she gets diagnosed with, they think, endometriosis, and then a year later with Crohn's disease. And despite really big health problems, by 24, she's at a top-tier law firm in Sydney and doing well, and then has a monumental health crisis, literally collapses in the office and can't go back to work, ends up having to move back to a small town with her mum and dad and looking for a way forward. And the doctors just keep identifying more symptoms, but not getting to a cause. And eventually a lovely GP in her parents' town reaches out and says, well, look, I might not have an answer, but I would like to see if I can help. Please come and see me. And he takes a totally different approach. He sort of says to Georgie, I'm sorry you've been through such an awful time with your health. So immediately he's treating her like a person. He then moves on to, in my 35 years of experience, what I've found is that when someone has a lot of symptoms that we can't work out where they're coming from, there's almost always a huge amount of stress leading to at least some of those symptoms. And that if you live with those symptoms and the stress long enough, you eventually become distressed. Would you like it if we started working on how to address the fact that you are now distressed by what's going on, so that we can reduce your stress, maybe alleviate some of the symptoms, and then get a clearer vision of what the cause might be? So the first time at 24 at rock bottom, she suddenly is being treated like a whole person. And the path forward he proposes is to go into a psychiatric hospital and address the distress and the stress. And she agrees, and she discovers that she's had generalized anxiety disorder probably since she was 12. And despite that has been an overachiever. And despite all the health issues, has just kept doing things that are amazing. And the book, once we're at this point, is all about rebuilding her life and getting on with her life with 2 really big lessons. And the 2 really big lessons are, don't take mental health for granted, because if you do, when it knocks you down, it will knock you down big time. And that you can get the tools to do something about it, but you have to choose to do the work, learn to use the tools. And the other side of it is, life's hard. You need to be doing things you value that are meaningful. She was studying communications and law at the same time, getting better marks in law and could see a clearer path, so she became a lawyer. The reality is that the pressure of the job on top of everything else probably contributed to the stress and the distress. After she recovered, she became a journalist, and despite all the pressures of having her first baby with her husband in England, away from their families, having 2 more children when he was qualifying to be a reconstructive surgeon, and she's a serious editor in important publications in Australia, despite all this stress, because family and being a journalist mattered to her so much, she has handled her anxiety. She has handled her health problems and kept putting her best foot forward because there's so much meaning in her life that she wants to keep achieving. And just the power of going, you can deal with almost anything if you do the work, and pick the right thing to do with your time because it makes it easier to do the work.
I've never seen any life transformation that didn't begin with the person in question finally getting tired of their own bullshit. Elizabeth Gilbert. At age 24, my life was almost a cliche. 6 years of study were behind me. I was holding down a plum job as a lawyer in the city. I was living with my lovely boyfriend. I had great friends, and the world was seemingly at my feet. From the outside, it might have looked charmed. In truth, it was anything but. I was miserable and chronically ill. My self-esteem was in tatters, and I was strung out, constantly panicked and painfully thin. For 12 months, I had been ignoring the worsening symptoms of my autoimmune disease, the heightened state of stress in which I existed, the self-loathing I couldn't overcome. I woke up day after day after day, ignored how wrecked I felt, and kept pretending. I figured if I pushed aside my misery for long enough, it would go away. It didn't. It came to a head one night when I fell over at work with what I believed was a spell of vertigo, which developed into debilitating dizziness. It soon became apparent that it wasn't going to pass as quickly as it had arrived. Instead, it gathered momentum, and within a few weeks, my life had crumbled around me. I was unable to work. I moved back in with my parents, and I spent 4 months either in bed or in various hospitals, unable to function. Physically, I felt horrendous. My days were plagued with nausea, dizziness, weakness. And as my head continued to spin, my grip on the world slipped with every passing day. It culminated in depression and anxiety severe enough to warrant my admission to a psychiatric hospital for 2 weeks. One day, it seemed, I was an ordinarily functioning member of society, and the next I had been more or less sectioned, barely able to participate in the outside world. How did that happen? What went so wrong? These are the questions I was forced to examine forensically in the psychiatric hospital, and subjects I returned to regularly in the weeks, months, and years afterwards.
So, you used the term grounded a lot when we first started this episode, and we always talk about how do we land this to be practical principles for those of us who are leading or owning or running small businesses. And I'm picking up on a couple of things here, but one is your stress levels, being really aware.
When it goes from positive to negative, yes.
Yes, because there's a certain amount of stress that is what keeps our system bubbling along.
And makes us excited about tomorrow. Like we can have butterflies in our stomach, but still be excited. That's good positive stress. Be glad you have it. Otherwise, it would be a boring day.
But
recognise when it starts going to the negative stress from which you aren't recovering, that is starting to reduce your performance, that's starting to affect how you relate with the world and how you connect with people and your own perception of yourself.
And one of the levers we've got to pull there is sleep.
Yep.
Because you were talking about how stress is so correlated with our cortisol levels.
Yep.
So sleep gives our body a fighting chance, but we need to then look at the triggers and the systems that we're in that are really elevating our unhappiness.
A really big thing Georgie realised is until her breakdown, well, not really her, well, she says it herself, breaking badly, we can call it her breakdown, I guess, is that until then, relaxation was for a couple of days at the end of the semester. Or every few months once she joined the law firm, she could have a whole day off. No. Absolutely no. You need to be paying attention to, do you have any energy? Are you looking forward to something fun? Are you okay at the end of the day to go out with friends and family and recharge your batteries? If you're not, you already have gone too far down the path of negative stress. You have to stay in a space where you're looking forward to things, and the things you do recharge your emotional and physical batteries. Because if you don't do that, This business you've built, these relationships you've built, it's all going to be at risk.
Wow. So that's the other side of the coin, is hopefully being involved in something that we love, that we'd almost do for free if we could do it for free, which sounds high and mighty and pie in the sky for many people. But are you saying we can't afford to be cynical about this perspective?
No, and particularly for our audience and the people we work with, where it's normally small business. No one starts a small business because it was the easy option. They start it because they felt compelled. Something about it is fun. Something about it is meaningful. Something about it, it's the thing they're really good at. So they get joy doing it, and they desperately hope people will pay to let them keep doing it. Like, really, small business people are some of the most connected to their core drives people I think you could ever meet, which means they're even at more risk, because it's really hard to work out how to be a successful small business person in a world that's going over big bumps. And you think you can fight through and you can push through. Be careful how far you push, or you may discover there's nothing left in the tank and the only thing left to do is to lay down in a heap for a while. And in small business, there's not normally someone to pick up the slack for you.
On that note, good night, David.
Good night, Steve.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. These are the marketing challenges keeping you up at night. As Oscar said, we ask questions for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity, no hidden agenda, just genuine interest in what's actually happening.
In the problem segment, I manage quite a number of websites. More than 100. I haven't actually counted them recently. And I've noticed a submission come in on forms one by one from a place called Turbo Jot or something like that, from Alyssa. And it says, "Hi, my name's Alyssa. I'd love to invite you to try Turbo Jot. I actually founded the company. It's built to automate contact form submissions at scale. Simply upload a list of URLs and TurboJet automatically finds and submits contact forms on those sites. It beats cold email and paid ads on ROI, return on investment, and costs just 10 cents per submission. It's powered by a rotating IP network and a stealth browser. So they keep changing the IP address so people can't block them effectively, and a stealth browser so they can't be seen." Nothing shady about this so far, David.
Nothing at all.
It also has AI capture solving, so they use artificial intelligence to get past the thing that's meant to keep you out, and human-like browsing behavior. You can sign up for free and give it a try here. I'd really appreciate the support. Well, Alyssa, I'd really appreciate if you stopped this stupid business that is part of the rot of this world and get a proper job. Do something constructive, because this is BS. Anything to add, David?
Alyssa, please get a real name.
Seriously, I get angry. I know we were meant to finish then, but this is the rubbish that just wastes everybody's time. If their offer is full of all the stuff that bad actors use, run a million miles an hour. Don't give in to that little part in the human psyche which says, "Oh, this sounds like it's easy," which it isn't. You've got to give them the list of URLs. So you're doing all the work. You might as well, And then it is cold calling. It is spamming.
What's worse? Because if you cold call, you can respond to the person you're talking to. And you can immediately show them that it might be a cold call, but that you're listening and you thought there was a good reason to ring them and maybe you could help them with something.
Yeah.
So cold calling isn't evil, it's a necessity of business, but there's a right way to do it, and it's a human talking to a human.
Goodbye, Alyssa.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4, perspicacity. Let's examine a campaign from the past and ask, would it work today? As Oscar Wilde believed, our one duty to history is to rewrite it. So let's see what we can learn.
David, in perspicacity in this episode, which is where we look at old campaigns and compare them to new ones or how they would work today, I feel like it's going to be the blind leading the sighted. You're going to take the lead.
This is a scary concept, but we can manage this. There will be a Kane, then me, then Steve. I will put him directly behind me, so I have to fall over shit first.
I think that just is collegiate love, and I think Georgie Dent would love that.
I hope so.
Yes. So we're talking about Royal Society for the Blind, and we've picked a couple of online videos / commercials that they've run just to contrast and compare. And we're going to go back in time first, David.
Back in time we go.
This is Charlie, and this June you can help by donating your spare change during Change for Charlie Month.
Join us in raising money for Charlie so he can become a fully trained RSP guide dog, just like my Ella.
Register for a donation tin and start collecting to help train Charlie become an RSP guide dog. It costs $25,000 to raise and train an RSP guide dog. Will you change for Charlie in June?
Come on, Ella, show Charlie how it's done.
So Charlie, Change for Charlie. What's your takeaway? So I'm getting from this that they want our donations to fund the training of guide dogs.
The cute factor in this is very powerful with little Charlie and, with Ella the guide dog. But where's the purpose factor? We've got a young lady who has Ella as a guide dog and could have spoken about all the things she can do more easily in her day with Ella, and seeing her freedom and agency grow through having Ella in her life would have been, I believe, a more powerful way to get people to go, oh, wow, that's amazing, than the cute factor is.
So there's the practical thing that it costs this much money to train them, etc. Mm-hmm. And I guess this is where this particular commercial has veered over the facts, the features of what's involved, rather than the benefits at the other end.
So cute and cost without purpose, to me, was a lost opportunity.
And we are juggling 30 seconds of time, so judicious choices need to be made in this thing. But my intuition is with you that if I could see the things that could do now that she couldn't do without Ella, I'd be, wow,
Yeah.
how good to be facilitating that.
Precisely.
Now, I wonder if it was successful anyway.
I think it's just the constant work that the RSB does to always find a new way to do the same thing. You always need to train more guide dogs. It's an ongoing cost.
Yes.
And eventually they probably cycle through everything. But I'm guessing that ad was probably expected to do very, very well to people. This should attract more attention. Did it?
I suppose we should note also that you are connected to Royal Society Blind in some ways, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I am on the client advisory committee, just there to talk about my own experience of being blind and interacting with the organisation and what perhaps the organisation can do for people and do to connect with the community better.
So that ad, that was from a long time ago. More recently, there's been a different tagline, See Differently. Let's have a listen to this.
Close your eyes. What do you see? Look beyond the emptiness, the challenges, the doubt. Because there is more. Listen. You'll see the world in the sounds around you. Watch the wind whistle. Watch the rain pitter-patter. Reach out. Feel what the people around you look like. Let the ups and downs of 1,000 words paint you a story. See the world your own way. Losing your sight is a daunting experience, but you don't have to go through it alone. We'll move forward together, side by side. We've been helping people change their view on blindness and vision impairment for the past 138 years. And we'll do the same for you. We'll give you the vision to imagine what's possible. We'll help you see differently.
All right. Does that help you see the RSB differently, David?
I think it's both intellectually and emotionally quite an inspired choice. The idea of saying to people that blind people see the world differently is a really good way to promote thought and to get people to sit and go, but, and to me this is the very big but, the RSB has wonderful brand recognition in South Australia. It's now in its 140th year. And to my mind, changing the key thing from the Royal Society for the Blind to see differently, the idea could have been bundled with the high brand recognition rather than trying to replace the high brand recognition with a thought experiment. So I kind of wish it had been handled differently so that it had the power of its old brand and the power of a big idea.
So, if you were ruler of the world, what do you think would have helped this approach? Because as you say, good thinking, good insight. What would make it land, do you feel? Is there anything in particular that springs to your mind? I mean, you haven't got the benefit that the agency would have had of hours and hours and hours to reflect on this. I'm putting you on the spot. What?
I would have simply turned the words around. At the moment it's see differently with the Royal Society for the Blind. I would have gone with Royal Society for the Blind. Everyone sees differently.
To tap into the known quantity.
Exactly, and then add the thought experiment to it.
What was the call to action?
Yeah, I think that ad might have just been the help get people used to the new branding, which again is a lost opportunity. So they go into the whole thing of they've been helping people for this length of time, but then they end with talking about seeing differently. Well, yeah, the thought experiment's great, but this has cost money and it's cost people's attention. So what do you want them to do with the attention? In AIDA terms, attention, interest, desire, action. It wasn't strong on the attention and the action was too understated, in my opinion.
And what's interesting is it seems to be, I wouldn't say targeted, but there's a strong focus on people who become blind at some point through life as opposed to...
Because that is the majority of clients. So I am a minority to be an RSB client who's been blind since birth. The majority of people have lost their sight along the way. So, there are very different people the RSB helps, and the two extremes are someone like on my end who, had 5% vision when I was born and has had a life of, working strange jobs and doing strange things. And at the other end, we had people who had very, not normal because it's a terrible thing to say, but they had lives lived in the sighted world as fully sighted people for a very long time before something happened. And they had the rug pulled out from under them and have to adapt.
So to apply our perspicacious thinking to bring this to a close, if we look at and compare the two of them, the first one focused on a particular aspect or service, and the second one was more abstract and ideological. Perhaps that process of picking one particular way that traction is gained between someone who is losing their sight or has lost their sight and what the Royal Society for the Blind can bring, maybe there's a harmonious point there where we get a chance to see differently and take some action.
Exactly. Tell a different story every year about a different person and what they needed and what the RSB helped them to achieve. Or now, what See Differently helped them to achieve. Like, to my mind, what seems to me obvious path is the path that keeps not being obvious.
You see, because you do see things differently.
A little bit.
Thanks for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you found this helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. And if you're so inclined, leave a rating in your podcast app. Both help more than you think. Steve and David welcome your thoughts, which you can send to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. That's podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. Want to continue the conversation beyond the podcast? You can book 20 minutes with Steve at talkedaboutmarketing.com. No cost, no obligation. And we'll leave the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.